Undercurrent, sponsored by John Hughes in Victoria Park. Choose your station before you choose your program. Absolutely.
I'm Johnny Cocroft, and this week is National Homeless Persons Week. We're here today at the Rua Centre in Northbridge to talk to one of Perth's 30,000 homeless people and find out how people become homeless and what it's like to live on the streets.
How I ended up on the street the first time, that was when I had my first mental breakdown, as they said it, right? I ended up in Swan District Hospital. My wife, if she hadn't smashed my head in with a hammer, I wouldn't have been like this today. I suffer with brain damage, epilepsy. Ever since I had this happen to me, they sort of put me down as if I'm a brainless person, brain damaged person. You know, and they just come in and boot the shit out of me, and all of a sudden they just like take all my money and everything. When I was on the street, you know what I used to drink? Goonie juice. That's a wine, and the reason why I used to drink it is so that I wouldn't feel the pain.
One of the things that we know is that mental illness is one of the factors that goes along with homelessness. Drug and alcohol use can be a factor as well. If you look at the population of people who are homeless, there's usually a whole range of other sort of things like mental illness, like drug and alcohol use, family breakdown. There's a lot of reasons why people end up being unstable in their accommodation. The rents in private rentals are going up significantly over the last few years. We've seen some people who've been able to rent successfully in the private market for years and years are now finding, that an extra, few dollars a week on their rental just pushes them to the point where they just can't afford it. And so we've seen families who become homeless, a lot of people, couples and individuals.
No matter how many shelters are built and provided, there will always be in any society a group of people who, for whatever reason, choose to live that type of lifestyle.
But I just think that there are very few people who would choose to live in a way which put them at great risk and made them extremely vulnerable. What we know is that people who are homeless, particularly rough sleeping homeless on the street, their life expectancy is about 25 to 30 years less than other people. I was reading a personal story of a homeless person just last week where he was saying he was on the streets for 3 years. And he said sleeping on the streets is a misnomer because he said you don't sleep. You've got one eye open the whole time to see whether or not someone's going to come and try and pinch your stuff or try and bash you up and steal your money or whatever it is. People can come in here each day, Monday to Friday, between 9 and 1 and basically receive some services and access some services. So people can come in and have a shower, come make a cup of tea, coffee, have a morning snack, and there are staff here who can actually spend time with people who are here and actually try and give them access to services. I mean, as in Richard's story, he's been able to get a lot of support in a whole range of ways over a number of years. He's been able to find a place to live. People have been able to help him get a whole range of other supports that he needed over the last few years.
When I come here, I stand there and I look at all the people. I talk to all the workers because they are my friends. They've helped me so much. They got me off the street. They helped me get my own place. They helped me get my life back together.
State and federal governments do commit quite a bit of funding into the homelessness area, but there does need to be more. It's not just about extra funding. I have to say, extra funding is part of the answer, but there's other things as well. I mean, it's about the policies of, the state government in its social housing, the Department of Housing Accommodation, the old Homes West. I don't think it is about blame. I think it's actually about identifying and understanding who is homeless and actually trying to help them.
Well, I certainly learned a lot today about what it's like to live on the streets and how people become homeless. There is help out there for them, but a lot of them don't realise what kind of options they have. I'm Johnny Cocroft, reporting for Undercurrent.
Well, sadly, it would appear that HIV is on the rise. Next up, Janae Tomlinson has more.
In recent years, the number of people living in Western Australia with HIV/AIDS has increased. We spoke to the West Australian AIDS Council about why this is.
At first, only gays and IV drug users were being killed by AIDS. But now we know every one of us could be devastated by it.
There has been an increase, and there's some definite issues around people not being concerned about it. People don't see it as a death sentence anymore, and they see it as, it's just another disease that people get, and you can take some medication and you'll be fine. So they don't actually understand that there's still a huge repercussions from having this virus.
Do you think the stigma around the disease has changed much since the 80s?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think there really is a stigma anymore.
Oh, people accept it more now. Once upon a time when you heard about AIDS, you freaked out and ran a mile, but these days, meet someone that's HIV positive, you don't really worry about it anymore.
Since we've started collecting data in the early 80s, there's been about 1,780 people in Western Australia diagnosed with HIV, and of those, 504 have passed away. Last year we had 105 people diagnosed in Western Australia.
Do you think there's enough campaigning about the disease?
Not really, I haven't heard anything. Especially somewhere like Australia, we just don't hear about. I mean, we know about it. You certainly don't hear as much as you used to about it anymore.
Do you think that there's enough campaigning about the disease to raise awareness?
I don't think there's any campaigning about the disease.
Probably not now, like, when they had the Grim Reaper ads and that sort of thing. I don't think there's that sort of stuff around now, and it's probably a good idea that they brought something like that in for the younger people, perhaps, yeah.
You're probably too young, but the Grim Reaper was a campaign that people really remember, and that only actually ran for about 6 weeks, but it's something that people even in 2012 still remember, but it was fear-driven. Whereas we know that fear doesn't necessarily change behaviour, it just makes people scared, that's all. It's more about trying to educate people and trying to give them information so that they can make some good decisions.
Do you think there's many misconceptions about the disease?
From my point of view, probably not, but maybe from younger kids that haven't been brought up in the AIDS scare, so to speak, they probably need a bit more education about it.
Well, there's not much.
It can't happen here because it's not a third world country, but a lot of people actually do have AIDS, like in Western culture and first world country, so to speak. So a lot of people still have that association.
People think that it only happens to certain types of people, and every one of us that is having sex is potentially at risk if we're doing it unsafely.
We asked whether figures show if more men or women are becoming infected.
Yeah, there's definitely more men. I think that for some men that are travelling overseas to high prevalence areas may have been married and not necessarily been completely au fait with using condoms, and suddenly they go to a high prevalence area where they need to use them but they're not using them. Don't rely on someone telling you that they're HIV or that they've got an STI. Take your own precautions. So if you're travelling overseas, take your own condoms, or you're going out, take your own condoms and negotiate that. Talk about it with the person, or or you just say, this is what I do. I wear condoms. I expect you to wear condoms, and that's how it goes.
It's been 20 years. Some things have changed. Some have not.
Well, next up, a report from the CEC, who think that the UK is controlling our economy here in Australia.
The Citizens Electorate Council is 25 years old this year as a registered political party. We represent the only counter-position to globalisation and free trade policies in this country. For the last 25 years, we have not backed off the fact that one of the biggest problems that we have in this country is that we are dominated by a foreign power, and that's called the British Crown. Right throughout our history, the fight has always been with the British Crown and the City of London. You look at the fights with people like Jack Lang, the Premier of New South Wales, who was trying to stand up for his people when the London bondholders were saying in the middle of the Depression, no, you pay us our money. Jack Lang was saying, well, I won't pay that money back to you. Our people are starving. We've just sacrificed all these men in World War I, and you want us to pay this money back? Right? No, I'm not going to do it. You had John Curtin and Ben Chifley during the war control the entire banking system, put them under controls in order to be able to fund World War II, because they knew that if they didn't do that and they just let the British-controlled banking system at that point run everything, then Australia would be unable to defend itself. So what we talk about in our literature, and have done for 25 years, is that unless we become a sovereign nation, dump the idea of being under a British crown and dump everything that goes with it, then we don't develop as a nation should. And that's the sticking point, Tibor, with our political party, unlike any others. We don't budge on the issue that we should not be governed by a British Empire. You have to inspire people first about what the possibility is for our country and not lie to them about it. But you can't do it on the basis of not having the integrity of at least standing for what you've stood for a long period of time without change. Now, people may not like what we stand for, but they can't say that we have not been the same party for the last 25 years standing for the same thing. We're not a political party that, wavers with the breeze. So that's the difference between us. We have seen since the 1980s the rise of a very flawed political doctrine called free trade and globalisation, economic rationalism. We've gone from an economy that actually had a physical basis to one that's completely speculative. So when we talk about the need for national banking and going back to instruments that actually fund real physical production, agriculture in particular, manufacturing, right, it's foreign to people. They've been brainwashed by the speculation. Look, we've seen reports just last week. Ford Motor Company is not making any research and development in new Fords for 2016. Is it going to exist? Possibly not. Another car maker bites the dust. You're seeing more and more aircraft maintenance facilities in Australia shut down. I mean, our economy is riddled with debt. People, household debt, public debt, private debt. It's riddled with debt. The wealth is a fiction of the debt. A fiction in the sense that people think that's real wealth. It's not. That's the problem. And this is built up over the last 30 to 40 years with a global $1.4 quadrillion speculative bubble of debt, and people think things are okay. I don't think the people of Greece think it's okay, or the people of Spain. I mean, fortunately, we're not in that situation yet. Our political party has a unique platform of what we've done for the last 25 years, not deviating. We have different policies which will work because they've been tested in history to work, and it's a very interesting period of history right now.
Well, that brings us to the end of tonight's episode. I certainly hope you've enjoyed watching all the stories about the issues pushing the pulse of Perth this week. I'm Christy Mollica, and don't forget to join us next week for more of Undercurrent.
Undercurrent, sponsored by John Hughes in Victoria Park. Choose your station before you choose your program. Absolutely.